On the morning of January 15, 1974, Charlie woke up early, excited to go to school and prepare for an important test. He came from a loving family and had a future full of promise ahead of him. All he wanted was to make his parents happy. But that very night, fate had a very sad surprise in store. Upon returning home, Charlie would find his family in an unimaginable situation. The 4 members of the Otero family were in a very bad situation, all tied up and unable to ask for help. The police officers who arrived at the scene were so shocked that it seemed they had witnessed a nightmare. What happened left everyone very scared, and soon fear took over the community. People started locking their doors and windows, fearing that something similar could happen to them. At first, we thought it was just an isolated case, something that wouldn't happen again. But we were wrong. On April 4th, 3 months later, Catherine Bright, a 21-year-old woman, was found injured in her home, which was only 3 kilometers from the Otero house. It began to seem like a pattern was forming. "What clues do you have?" the investigators asked. "To be honest, we don't have many significant clues," one of them replied. The women of Wichita were very scared. In December 1977, the police received a frightening letter from the criminal himself. "How many people do I have to kill before my name appears in the newspaper?" said the letter. "Good evening, everyone. We have a special announcement. We received a new letter that may be from the killer. These messages weren't for the public. They were directed to someone called BTK. We really believe he is trying to communicate with us in some way. He sends letters with mysteries and postcards with clues. It was very strange to see a doll tied up in the same way it happened 30 years ago. This is one of the most difficult cases I have ever faced," said one of the investigators. For more than 30 years, a very dangerous criminal brought fear to Wichita, Kansas, always managing to escape from the police. "Where is he? Where did he go?" someone asked worriedly. "If we don't catch him soon, we may never be able to," another replied. But one man was determined to do whatever it took. "I don't care what happens to me," he shouted with determination. "To seek revenge. I just thought about how much I wanted to avenge my family. That occupied all my thoughts." What happened to Charlie and his family is just the beginning of a terrifying story that shook the city of Wichita. If you are as intrigued as we are by this mystery, don't miss the opportunity to follow every shocking revelation. Subscribe to our channel now and turn on notifications to be the first to discover what happens next. Each episode will bring new details and clues about the case, and you won't want to miss out. In 1974, the Otero family was new to the city of Wichita, Kansas. Joseph Otero was an energetic father who loved life, while his wife Julia was a loving mother to their 5 children. They were doing their best to build a beautiful future for the kids. Charlie Otero, the oldest son, admired his parents greatly. "My parents had an amazing relationship. They loved each other so much. It's the kind of love we all want to find someday." Charlie was 15 years old, an excellent student, and earned A's in school. He dreamed of a bright future and always helped take care of his younger siblings. What he wanted most was to make his parents proud. "My mom cared about everyone. She was so good that she didn't have a mean bone in her body. She always said the only thing she prayed for was to die in peace while sleeping. And that was the one thing that never happened." It was a snowy day and also test day at school. "I asked my dad to take me early so I could do some study time. Danny and Carmen also needed to go with me because they were going with him." After school ended, Charlie came home with his 2 younger siblings, all excited to tell his parents about the perfect score he got on the test. But as he approached the house, he noticed that the backyard gate was open and felt that something was wrong. "I went to the back gate and opened it, and there was my dog, Lucky, outside. I was happy and said, 'Hey, Lucky, what are you doing out here, buddy?' When I walked in through the kitchen door, I saw my mom's bag on the stove, turned over. The house was so quiet, it seemed like no one was there. Then I shouted loudly, 'Is anyone here?' One of my siblings shouted back, 'Charlie, come quick. Mom and Dad are playing a trick on us.' Chilled, I ran down the hallway, and as I looked into the living room, I saw my mom and dad. It was at that moment that my life would change forever. Joseph Otero, Charlie's dad, was lying on the floor with a belt around his neck. His mom, Julia, was standing next to him, also tied up. When I touched them, I realized they were no longer here. I could feel that something very bad had happened. It seemed as if they had looked at each other for the last time before they left. Charlie asked his younger brother to call the police, but the phone wasn't working. So he took his siblings outside and asked a neighbor to call for help. The police arrived and took me away from there. I told them, please, go to my brother and sister's school. Don't let Joey and Josie come home. They can't see this. Bring them to me. I need them here with me now. After a while, an important officer came to talk to me and said, Charlie, we have to tell you something sad. Joey and Josie were also at home. It felt as if someone had taken all the joy out of my heart in one fell swoop. Joey was like a little adult. He was handsome and loved sports. Josie was an artist, enjoyed writing poetry, and was quite shy. They both had bright futures ahead of them. When the police entered the house, they found Joey Jr., who was 9 years old, in his room. He was in a very sad situation. The officers saw marks on the carpet that showed someone bad had been there for a while. While searching the house, an officer went down to the basement. He thought he saw something hanging, like a training bag. But when he turned on the light, he saw it was Josephine, 11 years old. She was also in a very sad situation. Something very, very bad had happened to her. This story of the Otero family is truly heart-wrenching and full of sad twists. Now we want to hear from you. What did you think about everything that happened to Charlie and his family? How do you think he felt when he discovered what happened? Leave your comment below and share your thoughts and feelings about this tragic story. We want to hear from you. At that moment I thought, there is no God. I hate God and I hate the world. It was as if I had completely lost my faith. The investigators were very sad and shocked by what they saw and what happened to the children. It was something that would leave anyone devastated. It was an ordinary family, like so many others. No one could understand why they were chosen to go through something so terrible. Many people believed it was all due to drug problems. We thought it was just an isolated case, something that wouldn't happen again. But we were wrong. In February 1974, just a month later, Charlie was sent to New Mexico with his brother Danny and sister Carmen to live with an uncle. They needed to start a new life there. But for Charlie, everything felt meaningless and purposeless. When something very sad happened to my family, I felt a huge hole in my heart. It was like it had disappeared. I started to feel very bad and scared. Sometimes I did things that weren't good for me, just to try to forget the bad memories that kept playing in my head. Every day, I kept looking back, thinking that the bad person who hurt my family might come after me too. The only thing I knew that made me very sad was that they never caught that wicked person. I keep thinking I should have stayed home. If I hadn't gone to school early that day, I would have been there to help. Now, just imagine. On April 4th, 1974, very close to where Charlie had lived before, something very frightening happened. A 19-year-old boy was running down the street with a bruised face. He was so desperate that he asked passing people for help. Please help me. My sister needs help. Someone broke into our house, and she is still inside. When the police arrived at the boy's house, they found Catherine Bright, a 21-year-old woman, tied up with stockings. She asked the officers to untie her because it was hard to breathe. Unfortunately, someone had hurt her very badly. Even after they rushed her to the hospital, she could not recover. Her brother, Kevin, who had gone out to seek help, was also hurt but was getting better. At first, people thought what happened to Catherine had nothing to do with what happened to the Otero family. It seemed different because Catherine had been hurt in one way, and the Otero family in another. But then they noticed something curious. The stockings used to tie her up had similar knots in both cases. And in both houses, the phone didn't work because someone had cut the line before entering. Even so, it wasn't enough to be certain it was the same wicked person doing these bad things. You know what's cool? The police were able to create a sketch of the bad man with Kevin's help, who saw him up close. They showed this sketch everywhere in Kansas, even on TV. Everyone was looking for someone who resembled the drawing. A ton of people called the police saying they had seen someone similar, but none of those tips panned out. Then, in October 1974, 6 months later, something happened that got everyone excited. The police arrested a guy who said he and 2 friends had harmed the Otero family. People felt relieved when they saw this news in the papers. But then, suddenly, a reporter received a very strange call. The person on the other end of the line said, Go to the library. There's a letter hidden in a book on engineering waiting for you. It sounded like something out of a mystery movie, right? The letter started like this. I was the one who did this, and I did it alone. Let's make everything very clear. In it, there was information about what happened that only someone who was there could know. For example, it mentioned where Josephine was and how she was found. The person who wrote it didn't seem the least bit sorry for what they did to the Otero family. It seemed like they were angry because someone was trying to take credit for what they did. At the end of the letter, the person wrote something strange. They said the important words for them would be bind, torture, kill. This bad man claimed he would continue doing bad things and referred to himself as BTK. The police couldn't find him, and he vanished. For a long time, no one heard from him. The year 1975 passed, then 1976, and nothing. People in Wichita were afraid, but for Charlie Otero, nothing changed. He was living far away and didn't know about the other bad things that had happened. He didn't even know the nickname BTK. Charlie was very sad about what happened to his family. I lost hope. I didn't want to care about anyone or believe in anything anymore. I only thought about bad things. What happened to my family changed who I was, and I grew increasingly sad and angry. Charlie was going through a very difficult time and needed a lot of help to get well again. In 1977, Charlie managed to finish school, but he was always in trouble. When he turned 18, he decided to live on the streets. He did wrong things to get food and rode around on a motorcycle. That smart boy who could have done amazing things in the future had disappeared. Meanwhile, the bad man who called himself BTK returned to doing bad things. On March 17, 1977, something very sad happened. The police received a phone call from a man who told them, "A little boy knocked on my door and said, 'My mom is hurt. My mom is hurt. Call the police. A man hurt my mom.'" This story is very sad, isn't it? It's important to remember that there are good people who work hard to protect everyone and prevent bad things from happening. The police went to the boy's house and found something very sad. His mother was hurt in her bed. The neighbors said her name was Shirley Vian and she had 3 little children. It was Steve, the 5-year-old boy, who called for help. It seems that Steve saw something very bad happen to his mother. It's hard to imagine how such a small boy can deal with something so sad, isn't it? Steve, now grown up, shares what happened. In my mind, I was 5 years old, but I had actually just turned 6. My mom was feeling sick in bed and asked me to go buy some soup at the corner store. When I was coming back, a strange man stopped me and showed me a picture. And do you know what the picture was? It was of Steve's mom and his little brother. The man asked me if I knew the people in the picture. I said no, and he let me go. About 15 minutes later, someone knocked on our door. When I opened it, it was the same man, but now he had something dangerous in his hand. My mom told us to do what he said. He put us kids in the bathroom. He put down a blanket, some toys, and shoved the bed to block the other door. I peeked a little through the corner of the door. I saw my mom in a very bad situation. My brother broke the bathroom window, screaming for help. I managed to open the door and ran to try to help my mom. But I was too small, you know? I couldn't do much. It's a very sad memory that doesn't leave my mind. The police now had 3 very sad cases to solve. What happened to the Otero family, to Catherine Bright, and to Shirley Vian? The bad man who called himself BTK was doing what he said he would do, hurting more people. One day, the police received a strange phone call. When they went to see what it was, they found a woman who had been very seriously hurt. How did she get hurt? Someone asked. It looks like someone hurt her with their bare hands, the officer replied. The police chief, Richard Lemunyon, was trying to solve this mystery. 7 people had been harmed by the BTK, but they couldn't figure out who it was. To be honest, the chief said, "We don't have any solid leads. We have some ideas, but nothing that shows us exactly who this bad person is." It was a very difficult puzzle that the police were trying to solve. On a Saturday morning, April 27th, something very sad happened. Someone broke into the home of Mrs. Hedge, who was 53 years old, and took her away. This bad person even cut the phone lines so no one could call for help. An officer said, "It seems there's someone out there who sometimes does very, very bad things. The people in the town were very afraid. They started looking over their shoulders when they walked down the street and locked their doors and windows tightly at home. Another officer said, "The most important thing is for everyone to stay alert because we have a serious problem." After a while, they found Mrs. Hedge, but she was no longer alive. She was without clothes, and it had been days since she had passed away. Nearby, they found a pair of stockings discarded. It's a very sad story, isn't it? But it's important to remember that there are many good people working to keep everyone safe. The murders in Wichita happened very close together, and everyone was scared, especially the people who lived near the playground where the bad man, BTK, might be. But some people who survived know well what he's really like. Charlie Otero, Kevin Bright, and Steve Relford. Steve is now 20 years old, and his life is a bit complicated, just like Charlie's. "I always feel sad thinking about what happened to him," someone said. The BTK not only hurt his mother but also greatly affected Steve's life. Steve spoke about how difficult it was to remember his mother. He said, "The memories of my mom dominated me for a long time. I didn't care about anything, didn't matter where I went or if I was in danger. Sometimes I still feel very sad." Charlie Otero, who is now 34 years old, also has a complicated life. He doesn't have relationships as good as his parents did, but he has a son, and that has brought him a little joy. He named his son Joseph, in honor of his father and brother. Charlie is trying to improve his life, but deep down, he still feels a lot of anger and sadness that won't go away. "I just wanted revenge. I wanted to bring justice for my family. That was all that went through my mind." We are in the year 2004, and it has been over 12 years since anyone has heard from the bad man, the serial killer. Charlie is in a very difficult moment in his life. He is in prison, serving time for hurting someone, and 4 years have passed. He knows that if his parents were here, they would be very sad about what he did. His son, who is now 16 years old, visits Charlie from time to time. But this only breaks his heart even more. "It's been 30 years since, when I was 15 years old, I came back from school and found my family in a very sad situation in this house on North Edgemore." And that's how a series of well-known murders in the history of Wichita began. The BTK could have stayed hidden and escaped all of this forever, but his pride got in the way. It was January 2004, and for 13 years no one knew where the bad man was. The newspapers were talking a lot about the 30th anniversary of the BTK's first crime. Additionally, it seemed someone was writing a book about everything that happened with him. The BTK got very angry about this. He didn't like knowing that someone else was telling his story and getting attention because of the crimes he committed. He wanted to be the only one recognized for the bad acts he did. Good evening, everyone. We have very important news. It seems that the BTK serial killer, who has been silent for 25 years, may have started to communicate again. He might be back. On Friday, the Wichita police received a message that the Wichita Eagle newspaper had received a letter. In that letter, there was the driver's license of a woman named Vicki Wegerle, who had never been found by the police, along with some photos that scared everyone greatly. The photos show Vicki Wegerle in her bedroom, and no one from the police took those pictures. They were taken by the killer himself. Everyone was in shock at this frightening news. Wow! The story of the families affected by the BTK is truly heartbreaking and makes us reflect on how life can change in an instant. If you too are shocked and moved by what you heard, be sure to show your support. Leave a like right now. Each like not only helps spread this important message, but also motivates us to bring more impactful and revealing stories like this one. It can't be true. How is it possible that he is still out there? But when they looked at the address from where the letter came, they saw something strange. Bill Thomas Kilman. Look, the initials are BTK. In the following months, BTK began sending a ton of things to newspapers and TV. Letters, riddles, and even plastic dolls tied up with strings, just like he did with the people he hurt. It was very frightening to see a doll tied up the same way it happened 30 years ago. The FBI initially said, if you can get him to keep sending messages, eventually he will make a mistake. So they began sharing some information about BTK with everyone, hoping that someone might recognize him. The detectives started appearing more on TV, talking about the case. They wanted to give BTK the attention he craved, but they were also trying to make him feel important so that he would make a mistake. This is one of the toughest cases I've ever worked on. These messages he sent weren't meant for everyone. They were for the BTK. We truly feel he is trying to talk to us. It seems he was inviting BTK to connect. Between March 2004 and January 2005, the police in Wichita received 5 messages from the bad man. Then, on January 25th, things became even more surprising. The last letter was found inside a cereal box that someone left in a Home Depot parking lot. In that letter, the killer asked if the police could trace a floppy disk. The BTK asked the police, "Can you trace a floppy disk? Please be honest." This guy thought we wouldn't lie to him, as if we were all enjoying this game as much as he was. The police decided not to be honest with BTK. They said, "No, we can't trace it." To respond to him, the police decided to put a message in the classifieds. The message would be, "Rex, it's going to be okay." I was afraid he would send a floppy disk, and that could lead us to the wrong person. If that happened, he would know we lied to him, and he could disappear forever. But for the first time, the investigators had something they hadn't had in 30 years. Video footage from the Home Depot parking lot. The image wasn't very good, so you couldn't see the man's face. You wouldn't be able to recognize anyone. But Ralph saw the footage and said, "Look, that's a Jeep Cherokee." This was the first real clue we had that BTK hadn't given us. Just a few days later, a floppy disk arrived at the Wichita Police Department. And guess who it was from? BTK. The forensic team was super excited and began analyzing the disk. Quickly, they discovered a username called Dennis and an organization named Christ Lutheran Church. I went there, did a Google search, and found Christ Lutheran Church. When I clicked on the page, I saw a picture of a man named Dennis Rader. But could it really be that easy? We thought this could be a trap. Dennis Rader was the president of his church and also worked as a compliance officer in the city of Park City. I was following some leads. Dogs are very protective and can also be fierce. He was leading a normal life. You know, he was a scout leader. Not only did he tie knots, but he also taught kids how to tie square knots. He worked for a company called ADT, which installs alarm systems. He was at home installing alarms. And guess what? He was a serial killer. So, we quickly drove to Park City and saw a black Jeep Cherokee in front of his house. The investigators decided to keep an eye on Dennis Rader 24/7 while they built their case against him. In 1974, we didn't even know how to spell DNA because that technology didn't exist at the time. But at the crime scene, where Josephine was, there was a pool of something. The investigator who was there had a very creative idea. He took a pillowcase, cut it into pieces, and dipped those pieces into the puddle to collect evidence. 31 years later, they obtained a genetic profile from one of those pieces he preserved. Ever since DNA technology arrived, the police had been looking for someone who matched that profile. And now, they discovered something interesting. Rader has a daughter who attended Kansas State University. His daughter, Carrie, went to the doctor and had a test done. I managed to get a search warrant to obtain a sample from that test. I rushed as fast as I could to our forensic lab. I remember those were the 2 longest days of my life. I will never forget that the lieutenant called me and said, "We have the DNA, it's him." BTK is actually Dennis Rader. On February 25, 2005, the police arrested Dennis Rader while he was on his way home for lunch in Park City. When the investigators confronted him, the man who had left the state of Kansas in fear for 30 years was very surprised. Lieutenant Landwehr pulled out an evidence bag, like those Ziploc bags, and placed a purple floppy disk on the table in front of Rader. He asked, "Do you know what this is?" Dennis Rader started tapping the floppy disk with his finger and replied, "I have a question." He thought the lieutenant was joking around, thinking they had some interesting news to share. The mystery of the BTK crimes may be close to being solved. That's right. The Wichita police and city leaders said today that the person who was interrogated yesterday is, in fact, BTK. In summary, BTK was arrested. I think most of the women in Wichita were super emotional that day, because we really didn't believe this would happen again. And you think, finally, we are safe, finally, we are safe. Although many people in Wichita were relieved by the arrest, most were very surprised to discover who BTK was. People knew Dennis Rader because he was active in the local church. For the victims' families, the news was horrifying. What could be worse than pretending to be a good person every Sunday when in reality you are someone very evil hiding? On the day Dennis Rader was arrested, I was tending to my garden. I received a call from my sister, and she said they caught him. I said, sure. And she replied, no, they really caught him. They are sure it's him. I hung up the phone and remember tearing bushes out of the ground, and they flew 3 feet above my head. Charlie Otero, who is trying to get his life back on track, finds himself remembering the day his family was murdered again. Dennis Rader, the man who hurt his parents, younger brother, and sister, is now on the front pages of every newspaper and on TV. For Charlie, the hatred he has kept inside him comes to the surface, and he will have to face it in court. The man accused of being the BTK serial killer is going back to court this morning. The families who lost loved ones because of BTK's crimes will be able to look him in the eyes. My mom was killed by one of the worst people that ever existed. You always imagine what the devil would be like. And now, here's this guy looking like a cartoon character, with a ridiculous haircut and a silly expression on his face. And I thought, oh, you're really scary. Yes, you could frighten someone at night, but in reality, you're just a little cockroach. On June 26, 2005, Dennis Rader enters the courtroom to begin his trial. All the surviving family members of his victims are there. They are there to ensure that the monster is locked away. Steve, the son of Shirley Vian, was there, as well as Charlie Otero. I went there thinking about putting my hands on him. I wanted to attack him if I had the chance. All right, Mr. Rader, how do you plead? Guilty. It didn't matter what happened to me. I just wanted revenge. In the United States and also in the state of Kansas, people who are accused of something have the right to be tried by a group of 12 people who are like them. I wanted revenge for my family. That was all I could think about. I didn't know how my family had died until he confessed. Well, I faced the family, pulled out a gun, and confronted Mr. Otero. He said my mom said, "May God forgive you for what you are doing." Hearing that broke my heart because my mom said those things while he was hurting her family right in front of her. I wanted revenge. I wanted revenge for my family. For the next 45 minutes, the courtroom remained silent as the serial killer began to recount what happened to each of his victims. When I started to strangle her, I stabbed her 2 or 3 times, here or here. For many, like Charlie, it's the first time they are hearing these horrific details. Rader speaks in a very straightforward manner, showing no emotion or sorrow for what he did. I tied her up, put a bag over her head, and strangled her. The kids were banging on the door, screaming and crying. Charlie was waiting for the right moment to attack and take justice into his own hands when he received a call he never imagined he would get. When we returned from the lunch break, I received a call from my ex-girlfriend, the mother of my son. She said, "Charlie, Joseph was hit by a car." And she continued, "He's in a coma. He was hit by a car." In that moment, I made a promise to God. I would give my life. I would give everything. Just save my son. Charlie is then called to speak on behalf of his family, not knowing if his son will survive that night. My name is Charlie Otero. I'm not here to talk just about the pain I have felt for over 30 years, but to represent my whole family, both those who are living and those who have passed. It's not just me and my siblings who have suffered. The entire Otero and Burgos families have also suffered because of Dennis Rader. Sons, daughters, uncles, cousins, fathers, and mothers. We all lost precious moments that could have been part of our lives. He made me doubt my faith, changed my future forever, and separated me from my family for over 30 years. But the love I have for my mother won't let Dennis Rader ruin her memory. The lessons I learned from my parents are much stronger than the bad things he did. You, Dennis L. Rader, will spend the rest of your life in prison for all that you have done. Each of your sentences will be served one after the other. After Dennis Rader was sentenced, Charlie Otero left his anger behind and walked out of the courtroom as a new man. All the desire for revenge was gone, and all I could think about was my son. He woke up months later, as if he were a newborn. God answered my prayers and saved my son. To this day, I try to live in a way that honors that. I realized I was wrong to let what he did control who I was for so long. Now, I carry my family's memories with me and use them to guide me. My family is with me all the time. I give many talks to spread a message of hope and how we can change our lives. After meeting another victim of Rader, Steve Relford, We both joined forces because we have a similar story. Charlie discovered he could help Steve improve his life, and Steve ended up finding a brother in Charlie. Because of the pain we've lived through, Steve understands me and I understand him in a way that few people can. It seems that now, both of them have a brighter future ahead, just like other victims. Even when we walked out of the courtroom, many of us felt that maybe, just maybe, we can. Maybe not everything is lost. Maybe we can live in a way that honors those we love and have lost. We can do this through our actions and by trying to make the world around us a better place. And even though this doesn't bring back the people we've lost, and the pain never completely disappears, it gives us the chance to keep them alive in a way that is bigger than they are and also bigger than we are.